Enjoy this monkey food. What? How dare you? I'm not a monkey!
She was 14 years old, sitting in seat 12C, when a flight attendant picked up a banana, looked her directly in the eyes and threw it at her head. But what that woman didn't know was that the little girl she'd just assaulted had a mother who was about to burn her entire world down. This is the story of Naomi Carter, and trust me, you need to hear every single word of what happened 35,000 feet in the air on that Tuesday afternoon. 3 hours earlier, Naomi Carter stood in San Francisco International Airport, her hands gripping the straps of her backpack like it was the only solid thing in a spinning world. She was 14, all long limbs and nervous energy, with her natural curls pulled into two perfect puffs on either side of her head. She wore glasses that kept sliding down her nose, a vintage Fleetwood Mac t-shirt she'd found at a thrift store, and jeans with her old Converse sneakers that had seen better days. In her arms, she clutched a worn notebook covered in sketches of airplanes, detailed drawings of wing structures, engine designs, thrust calculations scribbled in the margins. This girl loved planes the way some kids love video games or sports. She wanted to be an aerospace engineer, dreamed about it every single night. Her Aunt Maya stood beside her at the gate, scrolling through her phone with one hand while absently patting Naomi's shoulder with the other. Maya was her mother's younger sister, the one who'd raised Naomi during the school year while her mom traveled constantly for work. Maya loved her niece fiercely, but she was distracted that morning, worried about a work presentation, checking emails, only half present in the way busy adults often are. "You have everything, right?" Maya asked for the third time. "Phone charger? Headphones? Your mom's address even though you've been there 1,000 times." Naomi nodded, smiling despite the butterflies doing aerial acrobatics in her stomach. "I'm fine, Aunt Maya. It's just a flight to New York." I know. But text me when you land, okay? Your mom is so excited to see you. She's been counting down the days." Maya pulled Naomi into a tight hug. 6 months is too long. I don't know how you two do it." Neither did Naomi really. She understood, in the abstract way teenagers understand complicated adult decisions, that her mother's work was important, that it required travel, that it paid for their comfortable life. But understanding didn't make the loneliness any easier. She'd spent the last 6 months living with Aunt Maya in Oakland, going to school, doing homework, sketching planes in the margins of her notebooks, missing her mom so badly it physically hurt sometimes. But today, finally, she was flying to New York for winter break. 2 whole weeks with her mother. No phone calls, no video chats, no, "I miss you, baby, just a few more weeks" promises. Real, actual in-person time. "She said she has a big surprise for me," Naomi said, trying to keep the excitement out of her voice and failing completely. Maya laughed. "Of course she does. Your mom doesn't do anything small." She glanced at her watch. "Okay, they're boarding. Get going before you miss your flight." One more hug, one more promise to text, and Naomi was walking down the jetway, her heart racing with anticipation. She'd splurged on premium economy, or rather Aunt Maya had splurged on it as an early Christmas present. "You deserve a little extra leg room," Maya had said when she booked it. Naomi had never flown anything but basic economy before, and the idea of a slightly bigger seat, actual meal service, maybe a warm cookie, felt impossibly luxurious. The airplane stretched before her, that familiar smell of recycled air and cleaning products, the sounds of overhead bins slamming shut and babies crying and business people on conference calls they absolutely could not miss. Naomi loved it all. She loved the physics of flight, the miracle of metal and engineering defying gravity, the romance of going somewhere, anywhere, of movement and possibility. She made her way down the aisle, counting row numbers, clutching her boarding pass. As she passed through first class, she couldn't help but peek at the wide leather seats, the passengers already sipping champagne at 10 in the morning, the flight attendants offering warm towels and genuine smiles. The first-class flight attendant was a woman in her late 40s with perfectly styled blonde hair pulled back in an elegant bun, her makeup flawless, her uniform crisp and professional. Her name tag read Cheryl Hamilton, and she had the kind of smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Naomi accidentally bumped the armrest of an aisle seat as she passed, her backpack swinging wider than she'd intended. The passenger, an older white man in an expensive suit, looked up from his iPad with mild annoyance. "I'm so sorry," Naomi blurted out immediately, her face flushing hot. "I didn't mean to, I'm sorry, excuse me." Cheryl Hamilton, the flight attendant, watched this interaction with an expression that shifted so subtly most people wouldn't have caught it. But Naomi did. She saw the smile drop for just a fraction of a second, saw something cold flash in those blue eyes, saw the way Cheryl's lips pressed into a thin line before the professional smile snapped back into place. Watch where you're going, Cheryl said, her voice pleasant but with an edge sharp enough to cut. It wasn't what she said exactly but how she said it. Like Naomi was an inconvenience. Like she was something to be managed rather than a passenger to be served. I'm sorry, Naomi repeated, shrinking into herself the way she always did when adults were annoyed with her. She hurried past, feeling Cheryl's eyes on her back like a physical weight. A few rows back, still in first class, a black man in his early 50s looked up from his laptop. His name was Marcus, and he was a corporate attorney who flew this route from San Francisco to New York every single week. He'd seen a lot in his years of business travel, had developed a sixth sense for the small cruelties that happened in transit, the microaggressions that most people convinced themselves they'd imagined. He'd watched the entire interaction between Naomi and Cheryl, and something in his gut twisted with recognition and concern. He gave Naomi an encouraging smile as she passed, trying to send some kindness her way, trying to tell her without words that she'd done nothing wrong. Naomi found her seat in Premium Economy 12C, a window seat. She stuffed her backpack under the seat in front of her, pulled out her aerospace engineering book and her notebook and settled in. The seat was bigger than economy, just like Aunt Maya had promised, with actual legroom and a small pillow. Naomi pulled out her phone and texted her mother. Just boarded? Taking off soon. See you in 5 hours. Can't wait. 3 dots appeared immediately, then her mother's response. Have a safe flight, sweetheart. Can't wait to see you. Big surprise waiting. Love you so much. Naomi smiled at her phone, that warm feeling spreading through her chest. Her mom always knew exactly what to say to make her feel loved, even across 3,000 miles. She tucked her phone into airplane mode and opened her engineering book, determined to finish the chapter on aerodynamic drag before they landed. The plane filled up around her. Business travelers in suits, families with small children, college students heading home for break, the usual mix of humanity that ends up on a cross-country flight. In the row across from Naomi, an elderly white woman with kind eyes and silver hair settled into her seat. She caught Naomi's eye and smiled warmly. First time flying alone, dear? She asked. Naomi shook her head. No, ma'am. I do it a few times a year to visit my mom. Well, you're very poised for your age. I'm Mrs. Patterson. It's lovely to meet you. Naomi Carter. Nice to meet you too. They chatted briefly before Mrs. Patterson pulled out her book and Naomi returned to hers. Behind Naomi, a young couple, maybe mid-20s, were settling in. The man, James, was showing his girlfriend Kelly something on his phone, both of them laughing. It was just a normal flight, filled with normal people going about their normal lives. None of them knew they were about to witness something that would make national news. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom with the standard welcome message. Flight 2847 to New York JFK, flight time approximately 5.5 hours, weather looking good, sit back and relax. The flight attendants began their safety demonstration, and Naomi watched even though she'd seen it 100 times, because she loved the precision of it, the choreography, the systematic approach to keeping people safe. Cheryl Hamilton stood at the front of the first-class cabin, demonstrating the oxygen mask with mechanical efficiency. Her smile was plastered on, professional, perfect. But Naomi noticed something. Every time Cheryl's eyes swept the cabin during the demonstration, they seemed to snag on Naomi for just a beat too long. It was subtle, so subtle that Naomi convinced herself she was imagining it. The plane pushed back from the gate, taxied to the runway, and then that magical moment that Naomi loved more than almost anything, the thrust of acceleration, the physics and power and engineering all coming together as the wheels left the ground and they were flying, actually flying, defying gravity through human ingenuity and mathematics made real. Naomi pressed her forehead against the window, watching San Francisco shrink below them, the bay glittering in the morning sun, the bridges stretching across the water like delicate threads. She thought about her mom, wondered what the big surprise was, let herself imagine the 2 weeks ahead filled with museums and restaurants and late-night conversations and just being together. She had no idea that in less than 3 hours her entire life would change. The seatbelt sign dinged off, and passengers began moving around the cabin, pulling out laptops, adjusting seats, settling in for the long haul. Naomi read her book for a while, made some notes in her notebook, sketched a new wing design she'd been thinking about. About an hour into the flight, she realized she needed to use the bathroom. She stood up, smoothed down her t-shirt, and made her way up the aisle toward the front of the plane. The premium economy bathroom had a small line, so Naomi continued forward into first class, where she'd seen another bathroom. It was allowed, she was pretty sure. She'd done it before on other flights without anyone saying anything. But as she approached the first-class bathroom, Cheryl Hamilton materialized in front of her like a perfectly groomed barrier. "Excuse me," Cheryl said, and there was that edge again, that sharpness hidden under professional courtesy. "This bathroom is for first-class passengers only." Naomi blinked, confused. "Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know. The one in my section has a line, so I thought." "You thought wrong," Cheryl interrupted, her smile tight. "You need to go back to your section." Naomi felt her face flush hot with embarrassment. Other passengers were watching now, including Marcus, the attorney who'd smiled at her earlier. He looked up from his laptop with a frown. "Actually," Marcus said, his voice calm but firm, "there's no policy against that. I fly this route every week, and I've never heard of bathroom segregation by cabin class." Cheryl's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Her eyes flicked to Marcus, registered his challenge, and Naomi could see her calculating, deciding whether to push back or concede. "Of course," Cheryl said after a beat too long, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "I was just trying to minimize crowding in the first-class cabin. But you're absolutely right, sir. Go ahead, sweetie." That last word, sweetie, delivered with such condescension that Naomi felt it like a slap. She mumbled another apology and hurried into the bathroom, her hands shaking slightly as she locked the door behind her. She stared at herself in the mirror, at her brown skin and natural hair and 14-year-old face, and wondered what she'd done wrong. Why was this woman being so mean to her? Had she been rude somehow without realizing it? Was she not supposed to be in premium economy? Was there some unwritten rule about who belonged where that she didn't understand? When she emerged from the bathroom, Cheryl was standing nearby, conferring with another flight attendant, a younger guy named Derek who looked uncomfortable with whatever Cheryl was saying. As Naomi passed, she heard fragments of the conversation. "I know her type," Cheryl was saying in a low voice. "Probably flying on someone else's miles. They always cause problems." Derek's response was quieter, but Naomi caught it. "She's just a kid, Cheryl. Lay off." Naomi hurried back to her seat, her heart pounding, her face burning. She didn't understand what was happening, but she knew deep in her bones that something was very wrong. She'd encountered adults who didn't like kids before, teachers who were impatient, store clerks who watched teenagers like they were all potential shoplifters. But this felt different. This felt personal in a way she couldn't quite name. She slid back into seat 12C and tried to focus on her book, but the words swam on the page. Her hands were still shaking. Mrs. Patterson glanced over with concern. "Are you all right, dear? You look upset." Naomi forced a smile. "I'm fine. Just..." The flight attendant was kind of rude about the bathroom. Mrs. Patterson's expression darkened. "The blonde one? I saw that. That was completely uncalled for. You didn't do anything wrong, sweetheart." Those words, "you didn't do anything wrong," should have been comforting. But somehow they made Naomi feel worse, because they confirmed what she'd suspected, that it wasn't in her imagination, that Cheryl Hamilton really was targeting her for reasons Naomi couldn't understand. The flight continued. Naomi tried to lose herself in her studies, in the beautiful mathematics of flight, in the dreams of the planes she'd design someday. But she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, of being unwelcome in a space she'd paid to occupy. About 2 hours into the flight, the meal service began. Naomi loved airplane food in that way that makes food snobs cringe. She loved the little trays, the tiny salt and pepper packets, the sense of occasion around eating at 35,000 feet. She watched as the flight attendants moved through the cabin with their carts, serving first class first with elaborate presentations and multiple courses. When the cart reached premium economy, a different flight attendant, a friendly woman named Patricia, began taking orders. But then Cheryl appeared, literally positioning herself to take over Naomi's row. Patricia looked surprised but stepped aside, and Naomi's stomach dropped. "What would you like?" Cheryl asked the passenger in 12A, her voice pleasant and professional. Then she turned to the passenger in 12B, same pleasant voice, same professional demeanor. Then she looked at Naomi, and something in her expression shifted so subtly that Naomi might have been the only one who noticed. The smile stayed in place, but it went cold. "And for you?" Cheryl asked, her tone just a fraction different, just slightly harder. Naomi swallowed hard. "Could I have the chicken pasta, please?" Cheryl made a show of looking in the cart, moving containers around, her lips pursed. "We're out of that." Naomi glanced into the cart. She could see at least 3 portions of chicken pasta sitting right there, visible, clearly available. Her heart started pounding again. Was she seeing things? Was she wrong? "Oh," Naomi said quietly. "Okay. What's available?" Cheryl's eyes narrowed just slightly. "What do you see available?" It was such a strange response, almost aggressive in its curtness. Naomi felt tears prickling at her eyes but refused to let them fall. She pointed to the vegetarian option. "I'll take that one then. Please." Cheryl handed her the tray with none of the care or attention she'd given the other passengers. She practically dropped it on Naomi's tray table, causing the drink to slosh slightly. Marcus had been watching from first class, his attorney brain cataloging every interaction, every microexpression, building a case he didn't yet know he'd need. He'd seen discrimination before, had fought it in courtrooms, had experienced it himself in 1,000 small ways throughout his life. And he was watching it happen in real time to a 14-year-old girl who kept apologizing for existing. Naomi picked at her food, her appetite gone. The vegetarian pasta tasted like cardboard, or maybe everything tasted like cardboard when you were trying not to cry. She thought about texting her mom, but what would she even say? "The flight attendant is being mean to me," sounded so childish, so petty. And the plane's Wi-Fi was spotty at best. She felt utterly alone, trapped in a metal tube 7 miles in the sky with someone who seemed to hate her for no reason she could understand. About 30 minutes later, the flight hit some turbulence. Not bad turbulence, just the normal bumps and jolts that come with flying through different air currents. The seatbelt sign dinged on, and the flight attendants moved through the cabin making sure everyone was buckled in. Naomi's notebook, which had been resting on her tray table, slid off and fell into the aisle with the motion of the plane. Her beautiful notebook, full of months of sketches and calculations and dreams, landing face down on the industrial carpet. She quickly unbuckled to grab it, but Cheryl Hamilton was walking down the aisle at that exact moment. And Naomi watched in what felt like slow motion as Cheryl looked down at the notebook, made direct eye contact with Naomi and stepped on it. Not accidentally. Not incidentally. She placed her foot directly on the notebook and put her full weight on it as she walked past. "Seatbelt," Cheryl said without even pausing, her tone clipped. Naomi grabbed the notebook from the aisle, her hands shaking so badly now that she could barely hold it. The pages were crumpled, creased with the pattern of Cheryl's shoe tread. Some of her sketches were smudged beyond recognition, weeks of work damaged. She clutched it to her chest and felt the tears she'd been fighting start to leak from the corners of her eyes. Mrs. Patterson leaned across the aisle. "Dear, are you all right? I saw what she did. That was deliberate." Naomi couldn't speak. If she opened her mouth, she'd start sobbing, and she wouldn't give Cheryl that satisfaction. She just nodded and pressed her face against the window, trying to breathe, trying to understand why this was happening. Behind her, James whispered to Kelly, "Did you see that? That flight attendant just stepped on that girl's notebook on purpose." Kelly pulled out her phone. "I'm going to start recording if she does anything else. This is messed up." In first class, Marcus was typing an email to Apex Airlines customer service, documenting everything he'd witnessed. He'd taken this flight 60 times in the past year, and he'd never seen a flight attendant behave this way. There was something deeply wrong happening, and his instincts told him it was only going to get worse. Naomi tried to text her mom again, desperate for that connection, that reassurance. But the airplane Wi-Fi kept failing, the message spinning and spinning but never sending. She'd never felt more alone in her life. She was trapped at 35,000 feet with someone who seemed to hate her, and she had no idea why, no idea what she'd done, no idea how to make it stop. The turbulence settled and the seatbelt sign turned off again. Cheryl passed through the cabin once more, collecting trash. When she got to Naomi's row, she reached across without warning and grabbed Naomi's cup of water, the one Naomi had been drinking from. Her arm bumped the cup violently, and water splashed across Naomi's tray table, soaking into her book, dripping onto her lap, leaving a cold wet stain on her jeans. "Oh," Cheryl said, her voice flat, emotionless. "You should be more careful where you put things. Not, 'I'm sorry.' Not, 'Let me get you some napkins.' Just blame, directed at Naomi for the water that Cheryl had spilled." Naomi sat there in her wet jeans, holding her damaged notebook, and something inside her cracked. The tears came freely now, silent and hot, streaming down her face. She grabbed napkins from her bag and tried to dry her book, tried to dry her clothes, tried to hold herself together. Other passengers were noticing now. The couple behind her, James and Kelly, were filming discreetly. Mrs. Patterson was taking notes on her phone. A businesswoman in row 10 was watching with her jaw clenched, her own experiences with discrimination making her recognize exactly what she was seeing. Marcus stood up from his first-class seat and walked back to where Naomi sat crying. He crouched down in the aisle beside her. "Hey," he said gently. "What's your name?" Naomi looked up at him through her tears, this stranger with kind eyes and genuine concern. "Naomi," she whispered. Naomi, I'm Marcus Webb. I'm an attorney, and I've been watching what that flight attendant has been doing to you. None of this is your fault. Do you understand me? None of it. Naomi nodded, but she didn't really believe it. Because if it wasn't her fault, then why was it happening? Where are you flying to? Are your parents meeting you in New York? My mom, Naomi managed to say. I'm going to see my mom. Okay, good. I'm going to stay right here for a bit, all right? And I'm going to make sure nothing else happens to you. Marcus pulled out his business card and handed it to Naomi. When you land, have your mom call me. What's happening here is serious and you deserve better. Naomi took the card with shaking hands, not really understanding what he meant, not understanding how any of this could be serious enough for a lawyer. But before Marcus could say anything else, before Naomi could even process what was happening, Cheryl Hamilton returned. She was carrying a fruit basket, the kind they serve to first-class passengers after the meal. Apples, oranges, bananas. She paused at Naomi's row, and Naomi felt every muscle in her body tense. Something in Cheryl's expression, something in the way she was looking at Naomi, sent alarm bells ringing in Naomi's head. Naomi had her headphones on, trying to calm herself down with music, trying to escape into something, anything other than this nightmare flight. She didn't see Cheryl pick up the banana. She didn't see Cheryl's face as she looked at this crying black teenager, this child who'd done absolutely nothing except exist in a space where Cheryl didn't think she belonged. But Mrs. Patterson saw it. Marcus saw it. James and Kelly saw it. Half a dozen other passengers saw it. Cheryl Hamilton picked up that banana, looked directly at 14-year-old Naomi Carter, and threw it at her head. Naomi's reflexes, honed by years of being the awkward kid who got picked last in gym class, kicked in at the last second. She saw the yellow blur in her peripheral vision and ducked to the side. The banana sailed past her head and hit the seat behind her, landing in James's lap. The entire cabin went silent. That thick, heavy silence that comes when something truly terrible has just happened and everyone is processing it in real time. Naomi pulled off her headphones, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might burst out of her chest. She looked at Cheryl, looked at the banana, looked at all the faces staring at her, and the full weight of what had just happened crashed over her like a wave. A flight attendant had just thrown a banana at her. A banana. At a black girl. The symbolism, the racism, the sheer cruelty of it hit her all at once and Naomi couldn't breathe. Oh, Cheryl said, her voice dripping with false innocence. I was just trying to offer you some fruit. Why are you being so dramatic? Marcus stood up so fast his first-class seat slammed back. That is completely unacceptable. Mrs. Patterson's voice rang out, sharp and clear. I saw what you did, young lady. You threw that banana at this child. Other voices joined in. I saw it too. I got it on video. That was deliberate. Passengers were pulling out their phones, filming now, documenting this moment that would soon go viral, that would spark a national conversation, that would change Naomi's life forever. Derek, the younger flight attendant, appeared looking horrified. Cheryl, what the hell did you just do? But Cheryl was doubling down, her face flushing red with anger and maybe fear. This child has been causing problems all flight. She's been disrespectful, taking up first-class space, and now she's making a scene over a piece of fruit. That's a lie, Marcus said, his lawyer voice coming out now, clear and authoritative. I've witnessed her do nothing but apologize and try to stay quiet while you've systematically harassed her for the past 3 hours. Naomi was sobbing now, full-body sobs that shook her shoulders, all the fear and confusion and hurt of the past 3 hours pouring out of her. She tried so hard to be good, to be quiet, to not cause problems. And none of it had mattered. None of it had protected her from this woman's hatred. The pilot's voice came over the intercom, sharp and commanding. Flight attendants, report to the galley immediately. Cheryl shot Naomi one last look and in that look was pure venom. Then she turned and walked toward the front of the plane, her professional mask cracking, her hands shaking. Marcus slid into the seat next to Naomi. Hey, look at me. Naomi, look at me. You're going to be okay. What just happened was assault. It was racist. And it was caught on camera by multiple people. You didn't deserve any of this. Mrs. Patterson came across the aisle and took Naomi's hand. Sweet child, I have a granddaughter your age. If anyone ever treated her the way that woman treated you, I'd move heaven and earth to get justice. You are not alone. James leaned forward from behind. I got the whole thing on video. The banana, everything she said. I'll testify to whatever you need. His girlfriend Kelly nodded. We both will. That was disgusting. Other passengers were calling out their support, offering to be witnesses, expressing outrage at what they'd just seen. And Naomi sat in the center of it all, this 14-year-old girl who just wanted to visit her mom, who loved airplanes and dreamed of designing them someday, who'd been targeted and harassed and assaulted for no reason other than the color of her skin. A senior flight attendant named Patricia Reeves appeared, her face grave and professional. She crouched down beside Naomi with a gentleness that made Naomi cry even harder. "Sweetheart, I'm so sorry. I'm Patricia, and I'm the senior flight attendant on this flight. Can you tell me your name?" "Naomi Carter," she managed to choke out. "Naomi, what happened to you was wrong. Completely, inexcusably wrong. I'm going to take your statement and we're going to file an incident report. Is there a parent or guardian I can call? Someone who should know what happened?" Naomi gave her mom's number, and Patricia stood up to make the call from the galley phone. She tried once, twice, 3 times. It kept going to voicemail. Meanwhile, in the galley, Cheryl was arguing with Captain Morrison and Derek. "I didn't do anything wrong. I was offering her fruit and she made a scene." Derek's face was red with anger. "I saw you, Cheryl. We all saw you. You threw that banana at a child." Captain Morrison held up his hand. "Ms. Hamilton, we have multiple witness statements and video evidence. You are immediately suspended from duty for the remainder of this flight. When we land, you'll be met by law enforcement." Cheryl's face went pale. "This is ridiculous. This is absolutely ridiculous. That girl has been a problem from the moment she boarded." "Stop talking," the captain said, his voice like ice. "Every word out of your mouth is making this worse." Patricia returned to Naomi, her expression pained. "Honey, I left a message for your mom. I explained that there's been an incident but that you're physically okay. She should get the message soon." Naomi nodded, clutching Marcus's business card in one hand and Mrs. Patterson's hand in the other. She felt untethered from reality, like this was happening to someone else and she was just watching from a distance. The plane flew on through the sky, carrying Naomi toward New York, toward her mother, toward a reckoning that none of them could have imagined. Because what Cheryl Hamilton didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that the little girl she'd just assaulted wasn't just any passenger. She was the daughter of Gabrielle Carter, CEO of Carter Aerospace Technologies, one of the most powerful women in the aviation industry. A woman who was, at that very moment, sitting in a board meeting with Apex Airlines executives, discussing a $100 million partnership. A woman who was about to get a phone call that would change everything. 3,000 miles away, in a gleaming conference room on the 45th floor of a Manhattan skyscraper, Gabrielle Carter was in her element. The conference room had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, a view that cost more per square foot than most people made in a year. Gabrielle sat at the head of the table, her natural hair pulled back in an elegant updo, wearing a power suit that had been custom-tailored to perfection. At 42 years old, she was the CEO of Carter Aerospace Technologies, a company she'd built from the ground up over the past 15 years. Carter Aerospace specialized in sustainable aviation fuel and electric aircraft development. They were on the cutting edge of making commercial flight greener, more efficient and more accessible. And today, she was in final negotiations with Apex Airlines for a partnership that would revolutionize their entire fleet. $100 million was on the table, maybe more. This was the deal that would take her company to the next level. The Apex executives sat across from her, 3 men in expensive suits, nodding along as Gabrielle walked them through the presentation. She'd been talking for 45 minutes, laying out timelines and cost projections and environmental impact studies. This was her life's work, the culmination of years of research and development and fighting to be taken seriously in an industry dominated by men who looked nothing like her. Her assistant, a sharp young woman named Michelle, sat in the corner taking notes. And it was Michelle who noticed first when Gabrielle's phone, sitting face up on the conference table, started buzzing. Once, twice, 3 times, 4 times. Gabrielle glanced at it, frowning slightly. Unknown number. She silenced it and continued talking. It buzzed again immediately. Same number. One of the Apex executives, a man named Richard who fancied himself charming, smiled indulgently. Sounds urgent. Feel free to take that if you need to. Gabrielle smiled back, that practiced professional smile that gave nothing away. I'm sure it's fine. Where was I? Yes, the implementation timeline. But her phone buzzed again. And this time, a voicemail notification appeared. Michelle caught Gabrielle's eye and mouthed, "Should I check it?" Gabrielle nodded slightly, not breaking her rhythm in the presentation. Michelle quietly left the room to listen to the voicemail. She was back in less than 30 seconds, her face pale, her hand shaking as she held up a note she'd scribbled. Emergency. Naomi. Flight incident. Call immediately. Gabrielle's entire world stopped spinning. Every word she'd been about to say evaporated from her mind. The presentation, the deal, the executives in front of her, all of it ceased to matter in the space between one heartbeat and the next. "Gentlemen," she said, her voice suddenly tight and controlled in a way that made everyone in the room sit up straighter. "I need to step out for a moment. Please excuse me." She didn't wait for a response. She was already out of her chair, already reaching for her phone, already moving toward the door with Michelle right behind her. In the hallway with the conference room door closed behind her, Gabrielle listened to the voicemail on speaker so Michelle could hear. Patricia Reeves's voice, professional and careful. "Ms. Carter, this is Patricia Reeves, senior flight attendant on Apex Airlines Flight 2847. There's been an incident involving your daughter Naomi. She's physically fine, no injuries, but there was an altercation with a flight attendant and we need to speak with you urgently. Please call this number immediately." Gabrielle's hand started shaking. She called Naomi's phone first. It went straight to voicemail. Airplane mode. Of course. "What happened?" Gabrielle demanded, her voice rising despite her best efforts to stay calm. "Where is my daughter? Is she hurt?" Michelle was already pulling up the flight information on her tablet. "The flight lands at JFK in 2.5 hours. It's still in the air." Gabrielle called the airline's main customer service number. Got put on hold. Got transferred. Got transferred again. Each minute that passed felt like an hour, each second an eternity. Finally, she got a supervisor who could pull up the flight information. "Yes, Ms. Carter, I see there was an incident report filed on Flight 2847. Your daughter is safe, but I can't give you details over the phone due to passenger privacy regulations." "Passenger privacy?" Gabrielle's voice was dangerous now, the kind of quiet fury that made boardrooms go silent. "She's 14 years old and she's my daughter. Tell me what happened." "I'm sorry ma'am, I really can't. But I can transfer you to the aircraft. The senior flight attendant should be able to speak with you directly." More hold music. More waiting. Gabrielle paced the hallway like a caged animal, Michelle hovering nearby, not sure what to do or say. Finally, Patricia Reeves came on the line. And she told Gabrielle everything. The bathroom incident. The sneering comments. The stepped-on notebook. The spilled water. The escalating harassment. And then the banana. Thrown directly at Naomi's head by a flight attendant named Cheryl Hamilton. Gabrielle listened to all of it, her face going through a series of expressions that Michelle had never seen before. Disbelief. And then, a rage so pure and focused that it was almost frightening. "My daughter," Gabrielle said, each word precise and sharp as a scalpel, "was assaulted on one of your flights." "Yes, ma'am," Patricia said quietly. "I'm documenting everything. Multiple passengers witnessed it. We have video evidence. The employee has been suspended from duty immediately. We're taking this very seriously." "Which airline is this?" Gabrielle asked, even though she knew, even though the answer was going to make everything so much worse. "Apex Airlines, ma'am." Gabrielle looked through the conference room glass at the three executives still sitting around the table, waiting for her to return, having no idea that they just lost the biggest deal of their careers. "What is the employee's name?" Gabrielle asked. "Cheryl Hamilton. She's been with us for 15 years. Gabrielle wrote the name down in her notebook, her handwriting sharp and angry. Cheryl Hamilton. She committed it to memory, burned it into her brain, this woman who had dared to hurt her child. "I'll be at JFK when that plane lands," Gabrielle said. "And I'm bringing my legal team." She hung up and stood there for a moment, breathing deeply, trying to regain some semblance of control. Then she turned to Michelle. "Cancel the rest of my day. Clear my schedule for the next week. I need you to make some calls." Michelle had her tablet ready, fingers poised to type. "Call Jonathan in legal. Tell him to meet me at JFK in 2 hours with his entire team. Tell him to bring everything we have on employment law, civil rights violations and assault cases." "Done. What else?" "Call Sarah in PR. Tell her we're about to have a situation and I need her to be ready. There's going to be media attention." "Okay. Anything else?" "Call David, our private investigator. I need a complete background check on someone named Cheryl Hamilton, employed by Apex Airlines. Everything. Employment history, social media, any complaints filed against her, everything." Michelle was typing furiously. "Got it. And Michelle? Call the COO. Tell him that Apex Airlines partnership we were discussing? It's dead. Cancel it. Permanently." Michelle's eyes widened. "That's $100 million deal, Ms. Carter? I don't care if it's $1 billion, Gabrielle said, her voice like steel. They hurt my baby. I'm going to make sure they understand what that means. She took a breath, steadying herself, then walked back into the conference room. The three Apex executives looked up expectantly. Gentlemen, Gabrielle said, her voice perfectly calm now, perfectly professional. I'm afraid I have some unfortunate news. Due to circumstances that have just come to light, Carter Aerospace Technologies will not be moving forward with this partnership. Richard, the one who thought he was charming, laughed nervously. I'm sorry, what? Miss Carter, we've been negotiating this deal for 6 months. We're practically at the finish line. Nevertheless, Gabrielle said, gathering her materials with precise, controlled movements, the deal is off. Effective immediately. But, we don't understand. Did we do something wrong? Is it the terms? We can renegotiate. Gabrielle looked at him with an expression that made him stop talking mid-sentence. In approximately 2 hours, she said quietly, I suggest you check the news. Then you'll understand perfectly. Good day, gentlemen. She walked out of the conference room, leaving 3 very confused executives behind, and headed for the elevator. Michelle was right beside her, phone already pressed to her ear, coordinating the response team. In the elevator, Gabrielle finally let her professional mask slip. Her hands were shaking. Her daughter, her baby, had been assaulted, racially harassed, humiliated in front of a plane full of strangers. And Gabrielle hadn't been there to protect her. The guilt hit her like a physical blow. She'd been so focused on this deal, on building her empire, on proving herself in a world that constantly doubted her abilities. And while she was chasing success, her 14-year-old daughter had been crying alone on an airplane, targeted by a racist flight attendant, with no one to call for help. We're going to fix this, Michelle said quietly, watching Gabrielle's face. We're going to make this right. Gabrielle nodded, but she wasn't sure anything could make this right. Nothing could undo what had happened to Naomi. Nothing could erase the trauma of being treated like that, of being othered and attacked for simply existing. But what Gabrielle could do was ensure it never happened again. Not to Naomi. Not to anyone. By the time she reached street level, Gabrielle had made 6 more phone calls. Her personal attorney. Her accountant. The head of the NAACP. A civil rights attorney she'd met at a conference 2 years ago. A journalist friend from college who worked for the New York Times. And finally, her sister Maya in California. Maya, Gabrielle said as soon as her sister answered, something happened to Naomi on the flight. She's okay physically, but... What do you mean something happened? Maya's voice went sharp with panic. What happened? Is she hurt? Gabrielle told her. All of it. And as she spoke the words out loud, the reality of it became even more horrifying. Oh my God, Maya breathed. Oh my God, Gabby. That baby. How is she? I don't know, Gabrielle said, and her voice finally cracked. I haven't been able to talk to her. She's still on the plane. Maya, she was alone up there with that woman for hours. She must have been so scared. You're going to the airport? I'm on my way now. I have a team meeting me there. A team? Lawyers, PR, investigators. Maya, I'm not letting this go. That woman assaulted my child. The airline let it happen. They're going to pay for this. Good, Maya said fiercely. Burn it all down if you have to. That's our girl. She deserves justice. Gabrielle's car pulled up to the curb, her driver already informed of the emergency. She climbed in the back, Michelle sliding in beside her with a laptop open, already coordinating. As they drove toward JFK, Gabrielle's phone started buzzing with responses. Jonathan, her head of legal, confirming he'd be at the airport in 90 minutes. Sarah from PR, saying she was monitoring social media. David the investigator, already pulling preliminary information on Cheryl Hamilton. And then a text from Marcus Webb, the attorney who'd witnessed everything on the plane. Patricia Reeves had given him Gabrielle's number. His message was brief but detailed. Ms. Carter, I'm Marcus Webb, corporate attorney. I was on flight 2847 and witnessed the entire incident involving your daughter. I have detailed notes and can provide testimony. What happened to Naomi was targeted racial harassment culminating in assault. I'm flying into JFK with her and will stay until you arrive. She's safe with me and other passengers who are looking after her. But she's very shaken. Please call me when you get this. Gabrielle read the message 3 times, her throat tight with emotion. Strangers on a plane were taking care of her daughter because she couldn't. Because she'd been 3,000 miles away, focused on a business deal, while Naomi was being terrorized. She called Marcus immediately. He answered on the first ring, his voice low so as not to disturb the other passengers. "Miss Carter?" "Thank you," Gabrielle said, the words completely inadequate but all she had. "Thank you for looking after my daughter." "She's a brave kid," Marcus said quietly. "She's been so composed through all this. But she needs her mom. We land in about 90 minutes. I'll be there. Can you tell her I'm coming? That I love her." "Of course. Miss Carter, I practice civil rights law. What happened here today was egregious. If you decide to pursue legal action, I'd like to help. I'm absolutely pursuing legal action. And I'd appreciate your involvement. Then I'll see you at the gate." Gabrielle hung up and looked out the window at the New York streets flying past. Her mind was already working, already planning. This wasn't just about Naomi anymore, though Naomi was the center of everything. This was about a system that allowed people like Cheryl Hamilton to terrorize black children with impunity. This was about an airline that had probably received complaints about this woman before and did nothing. This was about sending a message that this behavior would no longer be tolerated. Michelle's phone rang. It was David, the investigator. "Put him on speaker," Gabrielle said. "Miss Carter, I have preliminary information on Cheryl Hamilton. It's not good." "Tell me." "She's been with Apex Airlines for 15 years. 3 previous complaints filed against her for discriminatory behavior. One in 2019 from a black family who claimed she questioned whether their first-class tickets were legitimate. That was settled quietly for $50,000 with an NDA. One in 2021 from an Asian businessman who claimed she made xenophobic comments. That was dismissed as a misunderstanding. And one in 2023 from a Latina teenager who claimed she was dismissive and rude. That was marked as insufficient evidence." Gabrielle's jaw clenched. So they knew. The airline knew she had a pattern of this behavior and they kept her working. "It appears so. I'm getting deeper into it, but yes, it looks like Apex Airlines was aware of multiple complaints and either settled them quietly or dismissed them." "That's corporate negligence," Gabrielle said. "They put a known racist back in contact with passengers repeatedly." "Michelle, add that to Jonathan's briefing. We're not just going after Cheryl Hamilton. We're going after Apex Airlines for knowingly employing someone with a documented history of discrimination." David continued. "I'm also finding some interesting social media history. Cheryl Hamilton's Facebook is still public. There are some posts that suggest, let's say, questionable views on racial issues. Screenshot everything. I want a complete digital footprint. Already on it. I'll have a full report by tonight." As the car approached JFK, Gabrielle's phone exploded with notifications. Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. The video of Cheryl throwing the banana at Naomi had already been posted by multiple passengers. It was going viral. Michelle pulled up one of the videos on her laptop. Gabrielle watched it once, her face impassive, her hands clenched into fists. Watched as that flight attendant picked up a banana, looked at her crying daughter, and threw it at her head. Watched as Naomi ducked, watched the shock on her baby's face, watched her break down in tears. 5 million views already, Michelle said quietly. And it's only been up for 20 minutes. Gabrielle's phone rang. It was Sarah, the PR director. "Gabrielle, we need to make a statement. The media is already calling. They've identified Naomi from the videos. They know she's your daughter. They're connecting the dots to Carter Aerospace." "What are they saying?" "Right now it's just reporting the facts. Flight attendant throws banana at black teenager. Teenager turns out to be daughter of tech CEO. But it's going to become a bigger story fast. We need to get ahead of it. Draft a statement. Something brief. Acknowledge what happened, express that we're pursuing all legal options, and thank the passengers who stood up for Naomi. Send it to me for approval before it goes out. Done." "Gabrielle, I'm sorry this happened. Everyone kept saying that. I'm sorry. Like words could fix it. Like apologies could erase the image of Naomi's tear-stained face, the tremble in her hands, the way she tried so hard to be small and invisible and safe." The car pulled up to JFK's terminal. Jonathan was already there with 2 other attorneys from his firm. They'd set up a temporary command center in a private lounge, laptops open, documents ready. "Gabrielle," Jonathan said as she walked in, "I've been reviewing the case law. What happened to Naomi constitutes assault and battery, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and violation of her civil rights. If we can prove the airline knew about Hamilton's history and failed to act, we can add negligent retention and supervision." "We can prove it," Gabrielle said, showing him David's preliminary findings. 3 prior complaints. Settlements and dismissals. They knew and they did nothing. Jonathan's eyes lit up the way lawyers' eyes do when they see a strong case. This is big, Gabrielle. This could be precedent-setting. Not just for Naomi, but for changing industry standards. Good. That's exactly what I want. I don't just want justice for Naomi. I want to make sure this never happens to another child. Marcus Webb called. The plane had landed and was taxiing to the gate. Gabrielle's heart started racing. In just a few minutes she'd see Naomi. Would hold her, protect her, try to make sense of this nightmare. She headed toward the gate with Michelle and Jonathan trailing behind. Airport security had been notified, and they'd arranged for a private area where Naomi could deplane without being mobbed by media. Because yes, the media had already descended. News vans were parked outside the terminal. Reporters were setting up cameras. At the gate, Gabrielle stood behind the roped-off area, watching the jetway door with an intensity that made other passengers give her a wide berth. She'd changed out of her power suit into jeans and a soft sweater, wanting to be mom right now, not CEO. The door opened. First-class passengers began deplaning. Then premium economy. And then, escorted by Marcus Webb and Patricia Reeves, came Naomi. Gabrielle's breath caught. Her daughter looked so small, so fragile, her eyes red from crying, her clothes still damp from the spilled water. She was clutching her ruined notebook to her chest like a shield. Mom? Naomi's voice broke on the word, and then she was running into Gabrielle's arms, and Gabrielle was holding her baby, feeling the sobs that racked Naomi's small frame. I've got you, Gabrielle whispered, one hand cradling Naomi's head, the other wrapped around her back. I've got you, baby. You're safe now. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't do anything wrong, Naomi sobbed into her mother's shoulder. Mom, I swear I didn't. I was just trying to get to you and she kept. I know, sweetheart. I know. You didn't do anything wrong. Not one single thing. They stood there in the middle of the terminal, mother and daughter, while Gabrielle's team maintained a perimeter around them, keeping the growing crowd of onlookers and media at bay. Marcus approached carefully. Miss Carter? Gabrielle looked up, her arms still around Naomi, her eyes wet with tears. Thank you, she said again. I don't know how to thank you enough for taking care of her. Marcus smiled gently. She took care of herself mostly. She's remarkably strong. But no child should have to be that strong. He handed Gabrielle his card. Call me tomorrow. We'll talk about next steps. Mrs. Patterson was there too with her husband. Miss Carter, I'm Evelyn Patterson. I sat across from your daughter on the flight. What that woman did was despicable. I'll testify to anything you need. James and Kelly approached next, introducing themselves, offering their video evidence and witness statements. One by one, the passengers who'd witnessed what happened came forward. Each one expressing outrage. Each one offering to help. Patricia Reeves, the senior flight attendant, approached last. Miss Carter, I filed a complete incident report. Everything is documented. I've been a flight attendant for 20 years, and what Cheryl Hamilton did today was the most unprofessional, cruel thing I've ever witnessed. On behalf of the good people at Apex Airlines, I'm so sorry. Gabrielle nodded, acknowledging the apology but not accepting it. Apex Airlines as a corporation would have to answer for this. One decent flight attendant's apology didn't change that. Meanwhile, on the other side of the terminal, Cheryl Hamilton was being escorted off the plane by Port Authority police. Not under arrest, not yet, but being questioned. She saw Gabrielle holding Naomi, saw the lawyers in the crowd, and the reality of what she'd done finally seemed to hit her. Wait, Cheryl said to the officers. Isn't that Gabrielle Carter? The Aerospace CEO? The officers didn't respond, just kept walking. Oh God, Cheryl said, her face going pale. Oh my God, that's her daughter? The full weight of her actions was crashing down on her now. She hadn't just thrown a banana at some random kid. She'd assaulted the daughter of one of the most powerful women in the aviation industry. A woman who had the resources, the connections, and now the motivation to destroy her completely. But Gabrielle wasn't thinking about Cheryl Hamilton right now. She was focused entirely on Naomi, on getting her daughter home, on making her feel safe again. Come on, baby, Gabrielle said softly. Let's go home. They made their way through the terminal, Gabrielle's security team clearing a path. Journalists shouted questions that Gabrielle ignored. Cameras flashed. People pulled out their phones to record. But Gabrielle just kept walking, one arm around Naomi, shielding her from as much of it as possible. In the car, finally, with the doors closed and the world shut out, Naomi curled up against her mother's side. Tell me everything, Gabrielle said gently. From the beginning. I need to hear it from you. And Naomi told her. Every detail. Every small cruelty, every escalation, every moment she'd felt scared and alone and confused about why this was happening to her. Gabrielle listened to all of it, her jaw tight, her eyes bright with unshed tears. And by the time Naomi finished, Gabrielle had made a decision. This wasn't just about getting justice for Naomi anymore. This was about changing an entire system. About making sure no other child, no other family, ever had to experience what they were experiencing. Baby, Gabrielle said, I need to ask you something important. What happened to you was terrible and wrong. And I can make it stop here if you want. We can handle this privately, settle quietly, and try to move on. Or we can fight this publicly. We can sue, we can press charges, we can make this a big deal. But if we do that, people are going to know your name. They're going to know your story. It's going to be hard. Naomi was quiet for a long moment, thinking. Then she said, Mrs. Patterson told me that this needs to be told. That people need to know this still happens. She's right, Gabrielle said. But that doesn't mean you have to be the one to tell it. What if other kids are going through this? Naomi asked, her voice small but determined. What if that lady does this to someone else? She won't. I'll make sure of that either way. But what about the other people like her? What about all the other kids who get treated like this and nobody believes them? Naomi looked up at her mother, tears streaming down her face. Mom, I had videos. I had witnesses. I had you. What about the kids who don't? And that was when Gabrielle knew her daughter had inherited more than just her ambition and her intelligence. She'd inherited her sense of justice, her refusal to accept the world as it was when it should be better. Okay, Gabrielle said, pulling Naomi closer. Then we fight. Together. And baby, I promise you we're going to win. At Gabrielle's penthouse apartment, a team was already assembling. Lawyers spread out in the dining room, reviewing case files and drafting complaints. The private investigator had sent over his initial report on Cheryl Hamilton, and it was even worse than Gabrielle had thought. Social media posts with coded racist language. Complaints from co-workers about inappropriate comments. A pattern of behavior that went back years. But first, before any of that, Gabrielle focused on Naomi. She ran a bath for her daughter, made her favorite tea, wrapped her in the softest blanket she could find. They sat together on the couch, mother and daughter, and Gabrielle just held her while Naomi cried out all the fear and hurt and confusion. Why did she hate me so much? Naomi asked. I didn't even know her. I didn't do anything to her. It has nothing to do with you, Gabrielle said firmly. Nothing at all. What she did was about her own prejudice, her own small-mindedness. You didn't cause it and you couldn't have prevented it. But I kept apologizing. I kept trying to be good. I thought if I was just quieter, just smaller, just more polite. Stop, Gabrielle said, turning Naomi's face toward hers. Listen to me very carefully. You do not have to make yourself smaller for anyone. You do not have to apologize for existing. What happened to you was wrong, it was racist, and it was not your fault. Naomi nodded, but Gabrielle could see she didn't fully believe it yet. That would take time. Maybe therapy. Definitely justice. Jonathan knocked softly on the living room doorframe. Gabrielle? Sorry to interrupt, but we need to make some decisions tonight. The media circus is only going to get bigger. Gabrielle looked at Naomi. Can you give us a few minutes, baby? Just rest here. I need to talk to the lawyers. Naomi nodded, pulling the blanket tighter around herself. Gabrielle kissed her forehead and joined Jonathan in the dining room. The table was covered with documents, laptops, photos, printouts of social media posts. It looked like a war room. Which Gabrielle supposed it was. Okay, Jonathan said, pulling up a chair. Here's what we have. Assault and battery charges against Cheryl Hamilton personally. Civil rights violation. Intentional infliction of emotional distress. Against Apex Airlines, we have negligent hiring, retention, and supervision based on her prior complaint history. We have corporate negligence for failing to implement adequate anti-discrimination training and protocols. And if we can prove a pattern in practice, we might have a Title VI violation. What are we looking at in terms of damages? Gabrielle asked. Compensatory damages for Naomi's emotional distress, medical expenses, therapy costs. Punitive damages to punish and deter future conduct. Honestly, Gabrielle, we could be looking at 8 figures if this goes to trial and we win. I don't care about the money, Gabrielle said. Any settlement funds go into a scholarship program for underprivileged kids who want to study aerospace. What I care about is systemic change. Then we need to add injunctive relief to the complaint. mandatory anti-bias training, independent oversight of complaint procedures, regular audits. Basically, we forced them to completely overhaul their policies. Sarah, the PR director, joined them. Gabrielle, we need to talk about the media strategy. The story is everywhere. CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, every local station. Social media is on fire. Hashtag Justice for Naomi is trending #1 on Twitter. People want to hear from you. What are they saying? Right now it's mostly supportive. People are outraged on Naomi's behalf. But there are some voices trying to downplay it, saying it was just fruit, saying Naomi is being dramatic. We need to control the narrative before it gets away from us. Draft talking points, Gabrielle said. I'll do one interview with someone who will take this seriously. Maybe Gayle King. And I want to emphasize that this isn't just about Naomi. This is about a pattern of discrimination in the airline industry. David, the investigator, looked up from his laptop. Speaking of patterns, I found something interesting. The 2019 family who settled with Apex? They're willing to break their NDA. They want to join the case. Gabrielle raised an eyebrow. They're willing to face the legal consequences of breaking an NDA? They said what happened to Naomi gave them the courage to speak up. They have a daughter the same age. They saw the video and it brought back everything they went through. They want to help. Contact them. Get their story. If we can show this is part of a pattern, it strengthens everything. The team worked late into the night, drafting complaints, coordinating with other victims, building an airtight case. And through it all, Gabrielle kept checking on Naomi, who'd fallen asleep on the couch, her ruined notebook still clutched in her arms even in sleep. Across the city, in a modest house in Queens, Cheryl Hamilton sat in her kitchen with her lawyer, a union rep, and a sinking sense of dread. The best-case scenario, her lawyer was saying, is that you plead guilty to a lesser charge, serve probation, and hope Gabrielle Carter doesn't come after you civilly. Gabrielle Carter, Cheryl repeated, the name like ashes in her mouth. I can't believe that was her daughter. Did you know who you were dealing with when you threw that banana? The lawyer asked. No, of course not. She was just some kid in premium economy. I thought. Cheryl stopped, realizing what she was about to say. You thought what? The lawyer pressed. I thought she didn't belong there, Cheryl admitted quietly. She looked out of place. I assumed she was flying on someone else's ticket, that she was trying to scam her way into first class. I got annoyed. The union rep shook his head. Cheryl, you threw something at a child because you didn't think she belonged in a certain seat on an airplane. Do you understand how that sounds? It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that, the lawyer interrupted. And there's video proof. And a dozen witnesses. And now the whole world knows about it. Cheryl's phone had been blowing up all day. Friends calling to ask if it was really her in the video. Her adult daughter furious and ashamed. Co-workers texting that they'd been questioned about her. Her entire life was unraveling. What do I do? Cheryl asked. You hope that Gabrielle Carter is merciful, the lawyer said. Because right now she has every legal right to destroy you completely. The next morning, Gabrielle woke up early. Naomi was still asleep in her bedroom, exhausted from crying, from trauma, from everything. Gabrielle stood in the doorway for a moment, watching her daughter sleep, feeling the fierce protective love that every mother knows. Her phone buzzed. It was Marcus Webb. Miss Carter, I hope I'm not calling too early. Not at all. I've been up for an hour. I wanted to touch base about the case. I've been reviewing the video evidence, the witness statements, everything. This is one of the most clear-cut cases of racial discrimination I've seen. We have her on camera. We have motive. We have impact. And now with the other victims coming forward, we have pattern and practice. When can we file? We could file the complaint as early as tomorrow. But I'd recommend taking a little more time to make sure everything is airtight. This is going to be a high-profile case. The airline will bring in the best lawyers money can buy. We need to be perfect. How long? A week. Maybe 2. I want to depose the other victims, get their stories on record. I want to review Apex's training materials, their complaint procedures, their response protocols. I want to know everything before we file. Do it, Gabrielle said. Whatever you need. Money is no object. I want the best case possible. You'll have it. How's Naomi doing? She's struggling. I'm getting her into therapy today. Someone who specializes in racial trauma. Good. Document everything. Every therapy session, every nightmare, every moment of fear or anxiety. It all goes toward damages. After she hung up with Marcus, Gabrielle made a series of other calls. First to Naomi's school, explaining that she'd need to be out for a few weeks. Then to a trauma therapist who came highly recommended. Then to the FBI. Yes, Gabrielle told the agent who answered. I'd like to report a federal crime. My daughter was assaulted on a commercial flight. The perpetrator is a flight attendant with a documented history of discriminatory behavior. The FBI took her report seriously. An assault on an aircraft was a federal offense. They opened an investigation immediately. By mid-morning, Gabrielle's phone was ringing off the hook. News outlets requesting interviews. Civil rights organizations offering support. Other families coming forward with their own stories of discrimination by Apex Airlines. Naomi woke up around 10, puffy-eyed and quiet. Gabrielle made her favorite breakfast, chocolate chip pancakes, and they sat together in the breakfast nook overlooking Central Park. How are you feeling, baby? Naomi shrugged. Weird. Like everything is the same but also completely different. I know what you mean. Is it true that the video has millions of views? Yes. A lot of people saw what happened to you. Do they think I'm stupid? For letting her treat me like that? No, sweetheart. They think you're brave. And they're angry on your behalf. People are calling for Cheryl Hamilton to be fired, for the airline to be investigated, for changes in the industry. Good, Naomi said quietly. Then, can I see the video? Gabrielle hesitated. Are you sure? It might be upsetting. I want to see what everyone else is seeing. Gabrielle pulled up the video on her iPad, muted it and handed it to Naomi. Watched her daughter's face as she watched herself being assaulted, watched the banana being thrown, watched herself duck and then break down crying. I look so small, Naomi said softly. I didn't realize how small I looked. You're small. You're 14 years old. You're a child. That's what makes what she did so much worse. Naomi scrolled through some of the comments. Most were supportive, outraged, demanding justice. But some weren't. This person says I'm overreacting, Naomi said, pointing to a comment. They say it was just a banana and I'm being sensitive. Gabrielle gently took the iPad away. Some people will always try to minimize racism. They don't want to acknowledge it exists because it makes them uncomfortable. But baby, we both know what happened. Every single person on that plane knows what happened. And a banana thrown at a black child is never just a banana. Over the next few days, Gabrielle and her team worked around the clock building the case. Marcus Webb deposed the other victims of Cheryl Hamilton's behavior. The family from 2019 told their story, how Cheryl had questioned their first-class tickets, implied they must have stolen them and humiliated them in front of other passengers. The Asian businessman from 2021 described xenophobic comments about where he was really from and suggestions that he might be carrying diseases. The Latina teenager from 2023 recounted being ignored, dismissed, and treated with contempt while white passengers in the same section received attentive service. A pattern emerged. Cheryl Hamilton didn't discriminate against everyone. She specifically targeted people of color. And Apex Airlines, despite receiving complaints, had done nothing meaningful to stop her. David, the investigator, uncovered even more damning information. Cheryl's Facebook page, which she'd hastily made private after the incident, had been archived by internet sleuths. Posts about those people and welfare queens, and sharing articles from questionable sources about crime statistics and immigration. Nothing explicitly racist enough to get her fired, but a clear window into her worldview. More importantly, David found internal Apex Airlines emails discussing the 2019 complaint. The HR director had written, another complaint about Cheryl. This is the second one this year. Should we consider termination? And the response from upper management, she's been here 12 years and has good metrics otherwise. Let's settle quietly and give her a warning. They knew, Jonathan said, reviewing the emails. They absolutely knew she was a problem and they chose to keep her anyway because it was cheaper to settle complaints than to properly address the issue. That's negligence, Marcus added. Textbook corporate negligence. Sarah, the PR director, was fielding interview requests from every major media outlet in the country. Gabrielle, we need to make a statement. The pressure is building. People want to hear from you directly. If you're still watching, I need you to hit that subscribe button right now. Because this story is about to show you what real justice looks like when a mother fights back. Gabrielle agreed to one interview with Gayle King on CBS this morning. She prepared carefully, reviewing talking points with her PR team, but knowing that when it came down to it, she'd speak from the heart. The day of the interview, Gabrielle dressed in a simple but elegant suit. Professional but approachable. Powerful but relatable. She wore her natural hair out, a statement in itself. Gail King greeted her warmly. Gabrielle, thank you for being here. I know this has been an incredibly difficult time. Thank you for having me. Let's start at the beginning. What was your reaction when you first heard what happened to Naomi? Gabrielle took a breath. I was in a board meeting when I got the call. When the flight attendant told me what had happened, that my daughter had been assaulted, that someone had thrown something at her, I couldn't breathe. Every parent's nightmare is not being there when your child needs you. And I was 3,000 miles away when my baby was being harassed and terrified. Tell us about Naomi. What kind of kid is she? Gabrielle's face softened. She's brilliant. She loves airplanes, wants to be an aerospace engineer. She's shy, sweet, thoughtful. She's never been in trouble, never caused problems. She's the kind of kid who apologizes even when she hasn't done anything wrong. Which is exactly what she did on that flight. Yes. I've reviewed the video, read the witness statements. Naomi spent 3 hours trying to make herself smaller, trying to be polite, trying to understand why this woman hated her. And none of it mattered because the problem wasn't Naomi. The problem was Cheryl Hamilton's racism. Apex Airlines has issued a statement saying this was the action of one individual employee and doesn't reflect their values. What's your response to that? Gabrielle's expression hardened. That's not true. We've uncovered evidence that Cheryl Hamilton had multiple prior complaints for discriminatory behavior. Apex Airlines knew about these complaints and chose to either settle them quietly or dismiss them. They put her back on flights, back in contact with passengers, knowing she had a pattern of targeting people of color. That's not one bad employee. That's institutional failure. What do you want to see happen? I want justice for Naomi. But more than that, I want systemic change. I want mandatory anti-bias training for all airline employees. I want independent oversight of discrimination complaints. I want real consequences for this kind of behavior. Because my daughter had video evidence, witnesses, and a mother with resources to fight back. What about all the other people this happens to who don't have those things? The interview went viral. Gabrielle's calm, articulate demand for justice resonated with millions of people. #Justice for Naomi trended even higher. Other families began sharing their own stories of discrimination by airlines. Politicians called for investigations. The FAA announced they'd be reviewing Apex Airlines training protocols. And Apex Airlines stock dropped 15% in one day. The airline CEO, a man named Richard Thornton, called an emergency board meeting. He'd watched the Gail King interview 3 times, watched his company's reputation crumbling in real time, and understood that this wasn't going away. We need to settle this, he told his board. Quietly, quickly, whatever it takes. His head of legal shook his head. I don't think Gabrielle Carter is interested in quiet. She's making this a crusade. Then make her interested. Offer her $5 million. $10 million. Whatever she wants. Sir, I don't think you understand. She canceled a $100 million partnership over this. Money isn't her primary motivator. Justice is. Meanwhile, the criminal case against Cheryl Hamilton was moving forward. The district attorney, motivated by public pressure and the clear-cut evidence, filed charges. Assault in the 3rd degree. Hate crime enhancement. Cheryl was arraigned, posted bail, and immediately became one of the most hated people in America. Her life was in ruins. She'd been fired from Apex Airlines. Her husband had filed for separation. Her adult daughter refused to speak to her. She couldn't leave her house without being recognized, harassed, called names. Death threats flooded her social media. Her lawyer pushed for a plea deal. Cheryl, if this goes to trial, you could face real jail time. The video is damning. The witnesses are credible. Gabrielle Carter has unlimited resources to prosecute this. Your best option is to plead guilty, show remorse, and hope for leniency. I didn't mean for any of this to happen, Cheryl said for the 1,000th time. But it did happen. And now you have to face the consequences. 6 months after the incident on Flight 2847, the case finally went to trial. Both the criminal case against Cheryl and the civil case against Cheryl and Apex Airlines. The courthouse was packed. Media everywhere. Civil rights activists holding signs. Families who'd experienced similar discrimination there to show support. And inside, Naomi Carter, now 15 years old, preparing to face the woman who'd terrorized her. The criminal trial came first. The prosecutor laid out the case methodically. The video evidence, played in the courtroom, still shocking even after millions of views. Witness after witness taking the stand. Marcus Webb describing Cheryl's escalating harassment. Mrs. Patterson's voice shaking with anger as she recounted what she'd seen. Derek, the flight attendant, testifying about Cheryl's comments and past behavior. Cheryl's defense was weak. Her lawyer tried to argue that it was a misunderstanding, that she'd been offering Naomi fruit and the girl had overreacted. But the video clearly showed Cheryl throwing the banana with force. The witnesses all agreed. The evidence was overwhelming. When Naomi took the stand, the courtroom went completely silent. She was older now, more confident, but still clearly carrying the trauma of that day. Marcus guided her through her testimony gently. "Naomi, can you describe what happened on Flight 2847? And Naomi did. Calmly, clearly, with devastating detail. She described every interaction with Cheryl, every microaggression, every escalation. She described how she'd felt. Confused, scared, humiliated, helpless. "When Miss Hamilton threw that banana at you, what went through your mind?" "I didn't understand at first," Naomi said. "And then I realized what it meant, that she was comparing me to a monkey, and I felt like I didn't exist as a person to her. Like I was just a thing she could attack." There wasn't a dry eye in the courtroom. The defense tried to cross-examine, tried to suggest that Naomi had been difficult or disruptive. But Naomi held her ground. "Did you do anything to provoke Miss Hamilton?" "No, sir. I apologized multiple times for things that weren't even my fault. I tried to make myself as small as possible. I just wanted to get to my mom." "Isn't it possible you misinterpreted her actions?" "No, sir. There were a dozen people who saw what happened. It's on video. She picked up that banana, looked right at me, and threw it. There's no misinterpretation." The jury deliberated for 4 hours. When they returned, the verdict was unanimous. Guilty of assault. Guilty of committing a hate crime. Cheryl broke down in the courtroom, crying, her lawyer holding her up. Naomi sat next to her mother, showing no emotion, just relief that it was over. The judge scheduled sentencing for 2 weeks later. And when that day came, Naomi gave a victim impact statement that would be quoted in law schools for years to come. "Your Honor, what Miss Hamilton did to me wasn't just about throwing a banana. It was about sending me a message that I don't belong, that people like me aren't welcome, that my existence is something to be mocked and attacked. I was 14 years old, going to visit my mom, and I was terrorized for 3 hours because of the color of my skin. I've had nightmares about that flight. I've been in therapy. I've struggled to feel safe on airplanes, which is hard because I love aviation and want to make it my career. Miss Hamilton took something I loved and made it scary. But I'm standing here today to say that I won't let her steal my future. I won't let her make me small. And I want other kids who go through things like this to know that they deserve to take up space, they deserve to be heard, and they deserve justice." The judge sentenced Cheryl Hamilton to 6 months in jail, 3 years probation, 500 hours of community service specifically working with underprivileged youth, mandatory bias training, and she was ordered to write a public apology to Naomi and make a donation to a civil rights organization. Cheryl was led away in handcuffs, her life in ruins, a cautionary tale about the consequences of racism. But the civil trial was even more significant. Because that one wasn't just about punishing Cheryl Hamilton. It was about changing an entire industry. Marcus Webb and his team had built an ironclad case against Apex Airlines. They proved that the company had received multiple complaints about Cheryl Hamilton and had done nothing meaningful to address them. They showed a pattern of settling discrimination cases quietly rather than fixing the underlying problems. They demonstrated that Apex's anti-bias training was inadequate, that their complaint procedures were designed to protect the company rather than the victims, that they prioritized profit over passenger safety. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Apex Airlines brought in a team of high-powered lawyers who tried every trick in the book. They tried to argue that they couldn't control every employee's actions. They tried to claim they'd taken appropriate steps. They tried to minimize the harm done to Naomi. None of it worked. The jury heard from the other victims. The family from 2019, breaking their NDA to tell their story. The businessman from 2021. The teenager from 2023. Each one describing similar harassment, similar dismissal of their complaints, similar settlements designed to silence them. They heard from aviation industry experts who testified that Apex's training was below industry standards. From child psychologists who described the long-term impact of racial trauma on adolescents. From civil rights historians who put this incident in the broader context of discrimination in service industries. And they heard from Naomi again, who described not just what happened on the flight, but how it had changed her life. The therapy. The nightmares. The fear. The loss of innocence. Gabrielle testified too. Describing the phone call she'd received, the terror of knowing her child had been hurt and she couldn't get to her, the fierce determination to make sure this never happened to another family. When the jury returned, they found for the plaintiffs on every count: assault, civil rights violation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, corporate negligence, pattern and practice of discrimination. The damages were staggering. $4.5 million in compensatory damages to Naomi. $10 million in punitive damages against Apex Airlines, specifically designated to send a message that this behavior would not be tolerated. But the real victory was in the injunctive relief. The court ordered Apex Airlines to completely overhaul their anti-bias training, making it mandatory for all employees at every level, with annual recertification. Establish an independent oversight committee to review all discrimination complaints, ensuring they couldn't be dismissed or settled without proper investigation. Implement quarterly audits of employee behavior, looking specifically for patterns of discriminatory conduct. Create a public reporting mechanism where passengers could file complaints and track their resolution. Pay for a scholarship fund, named after Naomi, for underprivileged students interested in aerospace careers. The verdict sent shockwaves through the airline industry. Within months, every major airline in America was reviewing their policies, updating their training, implementing new oversight procedures. The FAA issued new guidelines. The Department of Transportation launched investigations. Naomi's lawsuit had changed the entire industry. On the day the verdict was announced, Naomi and Gabrielle stood on the courthouse steps, surrounded by supporters, facing a sea of cameras and reporters. "How do you feel?" a reporter called out. Naomi looked at her mother, then stepped up to the microphone. She was 15 now, taller, more confident, her voice steady and strong. "I feel heard," she said. "For months after what happened to me, I wondered if anyone would believe me, if it would matter, if anything would change. Today I have my answer. People did believe me. It did matter. And things are changing. This was never just about me. This was about every person who's been made to feel like they don't belong. Every kid who's been told they're too sensitive when they call out racism. Every family that's been harassed and then silenced with settlements and NDAs. What happened on that plane was horrible. But what happened in this courtroom, what's happening in the airline industry now, that gives me hope. Because it shows that when we speak up, when we fight back, when we demand better, change is possible." Gabrielle put her arm around her daughter's shoulders, pride radiating from every pore. "My daughter is one of the bravest people I know," Gabrielle added. She didn't ask for this fight. But when it came to her, she stood up not just for herself, but for everyone who comes after her. I've never been more proud to be her mother. The settlement money, all $14.5 million, went exactly where Gabrielle had planned. The Naomi Carter Aerospace Scholarship Fund was established, providing full-ride scholarships to students from underrepresented communities who wanted to study aviation, aerospace engineering, or related fields. The first recipient was a quiet kid from the Bronx who dreamed of designing planes. When Naomi met her at the award ceremony, she saw herself from 2 years ago, full of dreams and potential. "You belong here," Naomi told her. "Don't let anyone ever make you feel like you don't." Apex Airlines, meanwhile, became a cautionary tale. Their stock never fully recovered. Richard Thornton, the CEO, resigned under pressure. The company spent millions implementing the court-ordered changes, but more importantly, they spent millions rebuilding their reputation. Cheryl Hamilton served her 6 months in jail. When she was released, she was a pariah. She couldn't find work in any customer-facing role. She lost her house, her marriage, most of her friends. She was required to complete her community service at a youth center in a predominantly black neighborhood, working with kids who reminded her every day of Naomi. One day, about a year after her release, Cheryl was working at the youth center when a girl came in, maybe 13 years old, with her hair in 2 puffs, wearing glasses, carrying a book about aviation. Cheryl felt like she'd been punched in the stomach. The girl looked so much like Naomi. And in that moment, really truly for the first time, Cheryl understood what she'd done. Not just the assault, not just the racism, but the attempt to crush a child's spirit, to make her feel less than, to steal her joy. Cheryl started crying right there in the youth center. The girl, confused and concerned, asked if she was okay. "I'm fine," Cheryl managed to say. I hope you never let anyone make you feel like you're not good enough. You are. You're perfect exactly as you are." It was the first genuine thing Cheryl had said about race in her entire life. And it was the beginning, maybe, of actual change. Not the performative kind, not the "I'm sorry I got caught" kind, but real, deep, uncomfortable reckoning with her own prejudice. She started reading. Really reading. About systemic racism, about microaggressions, about the experiences of Black people in America. She attended workshops on anti-racism. She really listened, to voices she'd spent her whole life dismissing or ignoring. It didn't excuse what she'd done. Nothing could. But it meant that maybe, eventually, she'd become someone who wouldn't do it again. Naomi, meanwhile, thrived. She graduated high school with honors. She got accepted to MIT for aerospace engineering, just like she'd always dreamed. She also got accepted to Columbia for a dual degree in engineering and public policy. She chose MIT but minored in policy, determined to design both the planes and the systems that would make aviation more equitable. At MIT, she founded a student organization focused on diversity in STEM. She gave talks at high schools about her experience, encouraging other students to speak up against discrimination. She testified before Congress about bias in the transportation industry. And through it all, she kept designing planes. Beautiful, innovative, sustainable aircraft that would change the future of flight. On her first day at MIT, Naomi boarded a plane to Boston. The same route, the same airline 2 years after the incident that had changed her life. She was nervous. Her hands shook a little as she boarded. But the flight attendant who greeted her was warm and professional, treating every passenger with equal respect and care. Naomi found her seat, pulled out her engineering textbook, and started sketching a new wing design. She looked out the window as the plane took off, watching the ground fall away, and smiled. They tried to make her small. They tried to tell her she didn't belong. But instead they taught her to soar. 5 years later, Naomi Carter graduated from MIT with honors. She was immediately hired by Carter Aerospace Technologies, her mother's company, where she began working on the next generation of electric aircraft. Her first major project was a sustainable regional jet that would reduce carbon emissions by 70%. She named it the Phoenix because it rose from ashes, because it represented rebirth and transformation, because it symbolized taking something broken and making it beautiful. At the unveiling ceremony, Gabrielle stood next to her daughter, both of them in front of the sleek silver aircraft, both of them having come so far from that terrible day on Flight 2847. This plane, Naomi told the assembled press and industry leaders, represents the future of aviation. But it also represents something more. It represents what happens when you refuse to let hate define you. When you take your pain and transform it into purpose. When you decide that the people who tried to clip your wings only taught you to build better ones. She paused, looking at the plane, at her mother, at the journey they'd been on. I was 14 years old when someone tried to tell me I didn't belong in the sky. Today I'm helping design the aircraft that will carry the next generation there. To every kid watching this, every person who's been told they're not good enough, not smart enough, not the right color or gender or background, you belong. You've always belonged. And the world is waiting for you to show them what you can do. The documentary about Naomi's case, titled The Banana, A Story of Racism, Justice, and Resilience, premiered at Sundance Film Festival that year. It won the Audience Award and went on to be nominated for an Oscar. Naomi and Gabrielle attended the premiere together, walking the red carpet, using their platform to talk about ongoing issues of discrimination and the importance of speaking up. The film included interviews with all the key players. Marcus Webb, who'd become a close friend and mentor to Naomi. Mrs. Patterson, who'd kept in touch and attended Naomi's high school graduation. James and Kelly, the young couple who'd filmed the incident. Patricia Reeves, the senior flight attendant who'd stood up for what was right. It also included, surprisingly, an interview with Cheryl Hamilton. She'd agreed to participate, to take accountability, to be a cautionary tale. I was raised to see the world a certain way, Cheryl said in the interview, her face drawn and aged beyond her years. I was taught, not explicitly but implicitly, that some people mattered more than others. That success had a color and a class. And I never questioned it. I never examined it. I just acted on those beliefs without ever acknowledging I had them. What I did to Naomi Carter was unforgivable. There's no excuse, no justification, no explanation that makes it okay. I took my own prejudice, my own small-mindedness, and I weaponized it against a child. I tried to make her feel less than human. And I've had to live with that every single day since. If this interview does anything, I hope it makes people examine their own biases. I hope it makes them question the assumptions they make about who belongs where. I hope it prevents even one person from doing what I did. Because the damage I caused can never be fully repaired. All I can do is spend the rest of my life trying to be better, trying to do better, trying to make sure no one else suffers because of my ignorance. The documentary ended with Naomi at MIT, working on her aircraft designs, surrounded by diverse colleagues, building the future she'd always dreamed of. The final shot was her at the window of an airplane, sketching in that same notebook that had been damaged on Flight 2847, now carefully preserved and repaired, a symbol of resilience. The voiceover was Naomi's. They tried to make me small. Instead they taught me to soar. And I'm not done flying yet. Today, Naomi Carter is 26 years old. She's a leading aerospace engineer at Carter Aerospace Technologies, with 3 patents to her name and a reputation as one of the most innovative minds in sustainable aviation. The Naomi Carter Aerospace Scholarship has sent over 200 students to college, with a 100% graduation rate. These students have gone on to become engineers, pilots, air traffic controllers, policymakers. They're changing the industry from the inside, bringing diverse perspectives and experiences to a field that desperately needed them. Apex Airlines completely transformed. Their discrimination complaints dropped to nearly zero. Their employee diversity increased. Their training programs became the gold standard for the industry. And they've had a standing offer for 20 years. Naomi Carter can fly any of their flights, first class, for free for life. She's never taken them up on it. The changes sparked by Naomi's case rippled through the entire transportation industry. Airlines, trains, buses all implemented better anti-bias training, better complaint procedures, better oversight. It's not perfect, discrimination hasn't been eliminated, but it's better. Measurably, documentably better. And it all started because a 14-year-old girl refused to accept that she didn't belong. Gabrielle Carter eventually stepped down as CEO of Carter Aerospace Technologies to focus on advocacy work. She started a foundation focused on combating discrimination in STEM fields. She speaks at conferences, mentors young women of color, uses her platform and resources to create opportunities for people who've been traditionally excluded. Mother and daughter work together often, combining Naomi's technical expertise with Gabrielle's business acumen and advocacy experience. They're a force to be reckoned with, these 2 women who turned trauma into transformation. On the 20th anniversary of the incident, Naomi gave a TED Talk that would be viewed over 50 million times. She stood on that stage, poised and powerful, and she told her story one more time. Not for pity, not for sympathy, but as a reminder and a call to action. 20 years ago, she said, a flight attendant threw a banana at me because she didn't think I belonged. Today, I design the planes that people fly on. I've turned that moment of hate into a lifetime of purpose. But here's what I want you to understand, I was lucky. I had resources, support, a mother with the means to fight back. What about all the people who experience discrimination and don't have those things? What about the countless moments of bias that happen every day in every industry, that go unchallenged because people don't think they'll be believed, or they can't afford to fight, or they've been taught to accept less than they deserve? Change doesn't just happen. It's fought for. It's demanded. It requires people to be uncomfortable, to examine their biases, to speak up when they see injustice. It requires systems to be reimagined and rebuilt from the ground up. I didn't choose to be a symbol. I didn't choose to have my worst moment broadcast to millions. But I chose what to do with it. I chose to transform pain into purpose, victimhood into victory, trauma into transcendence. And that's my message to you today. Whatever you're facing, whatever has tried to make you small, whatever has told you that you don't belong, prove them wrong. Not by becoming who they think you should be, but by becoming the fullest, truest version of yourself. By taking up space. By refusing to be diminished. They tried to clip my wings. Instead, they taught me to build better ones. And now, I'm helping others fly too. The standing ovation lasted for 5 minutes. That night, Naomi called her mother from her hotel room. Mom, can I ask you something? Anything, baby. Do you ever wish it hadn't happened? Like, do you ever wish we could go back and I just had a normal flight and none of this ever occurred? Gabrielle was quiet for a long moment. Honestly? Yes and no. Yes, because I hate that you experienced that pain. I hate that you had to learn about racism in such a violent, traumatic way. I hate that your innocence was stolen. But no, because of who you've become. Because of the lives you've changed. Because of the systems you've helped transform. Because you took the worst thing that ever happened to you and used it to make the world better. Not everyone can do that, Naomi. Most people can't. But you did. I couldn't have done it without you. And I couldn't have done it without you. You're the brave one, baby. You're the one who stood up and spoke out and refused to be silenced. I'm just your mom. I did what any mother would do. Not every mother has the resources to fight like you did. Which is exactly why we keep fighting. So that one day, every mother can protect her child the way I protected you. Every kid can get justice the way you got justice. Every system can be held accountable the way we held Apex accountable. They talked for another hour, mother and daughter, bound by love and trauma and triumph. And when they finally hung up, both of them felt the weight of the past 20 years, but also the promise of the future. Because the story of Naomi Carter isn't just about what happened to her on Flight 2847. It's about what she did with it. It's about the choice, the daily choice, to transform pain into power, to refuse to be defined by the worst thing that ever happened to you, to build a life of meaning and purpose from the ashes of trauma. It's about understanding that justice isn't just about punishing wrongdoing. It's about changing systems so that wrongdoing becomes harder to commit and impossible to ignore. It's about the quiet courage of speaking up when it would be easier to stay silent. The determination to take up space when you've been taught to make yourself small. The audacity to dream big when the world has tried to make you dream smaller. Naomi Carter was 14 years old when someone tried to tell her she didn't belong in the sky. Today she's the one building the planes that will take us there. And that's not just her victory. It's ours. All of ours. Because every time someone stands up against injustice, every time someone refuses to accept discrimination as normal, every time someone transforms their pain into purpose, they make it easier for the next person to do the same. Every time a girl like Naomi sees another girl like Naomi succeed, she knows it's possible. She knows she belongs. She knows her dreams aren't too big. That's the real legacy of Flight 2847. Not the lawsuit, not the policy changes, not even the scholarship fund. The real legacy is the message: you belong. You matter. Your voice deserves to be heard. And when you speak up, the world will change. 24 years have passed since that terrible day. Cheryl Hamilton is 70 years old now, living quietly, still doing anti-racism work, still trying to atone for the harm she caused. She'll never fully succeed, but she keeps trying. The other passengers have gone on with their lives. Webb retired from law but still mentors young attorneys. Mrs. Patterson passed away 5 years ago, but her granddaughter is now a pilot, inspired by Naomi's story. James and Kelly got married, had kids, and tell them about the day they witnessed history. Gabrielle Carter is 66, still fierce, still fighting, still using her platform to create change. And Naomi is at the peak of her career, designing aircraft that will define the next generation of aviation, mentoring students who remind her of herself, living proof that the people who try to break you often end up making you stronger. She still has the notebook from that flight, preserved in a frame in her office. The pages are still crumpled, the sketches still smudged. But she keeps it there as a reminder. Not of what was done to her, but of what she did with it. On the cover, she's written something in silver ink. A quote from Maya Angelou: "You may not control all the events that happen to you, but you can decide not to be reduced by them." And underneath, in her own handwriting: "They tried to make me small. Instead, they taught me to soar." That's the lesson. That's the message. That's the truth that Naomi Carter has lived and breathed for the past 24 years. Hate will try to diminish you. Racism will try to limit you. Injustice will try to silence you. But you get to decide if it succeeds. You get to decide if you'll be defined by what happened to you or by what you did with it. You get to decide if you'll let them make you small or if you'll use their hatred as fuel to soar higher than they ever imagined possible. Naomi Carter made her choice. She chose resilience. She chose justice. She chose purpose. She chose to fly. And in doing so, she created a path for countless others to follow. That's the power of one person refusing to accept injustice. That's the power of speaking truth to power. That's the power of turning your pain into something beautiful, something meaningful, something that changes the world. So if you're watching this and you've experienced discrimination, if you've been told you don't belong, if someone has tried to make you feel less than, remember Naomi. Remember that justice is possible. Remember that change is achievable. Remember that your voice matters. And remember that sometimes, the people who try to clip your wings only teach you to build better ones. If this story moved you, if it inspired you, if it reminded you that change is possible when we refuse to stay silent, then subscribe to this channel. Share this story. Let it be a reminder that justice isn't just something we hope for, it's something we fight for. And most importantly, when you see injustice, when you witness discrimination, when someone tries to make another person small, speak up. Be the Marcus who offers support. Be the Mrs. Patterson who validates the victim's experience. Be the James and Kelly who document the truth. Be the Gabrielle who fights with everything you have. Because that's how we change the world. Not through grand gestures or perfect moments, but through the accumulation of small acts of courage, of people deciding that enough is enough, that this stops here, that no child should ever again feel what Naomi felt on Flight 2847. We can't undo the past. We can't erase the pain that's already been inflicted. But we can shape the future. We can create a world where everyone truly belongs, where diversity is celebrated, where the color of your skin or your background or your circumstances don't determine your worth or limit your possibilities. Naomi Carter proved it's possible. She took the worst day of her life and used it to make millions of days better for countless other people. Now it's our turn. Our turn to speak up. Our turn to stand up. Our turn to create the change we want to see. Because in the end, that's what justice really is. Not revenge. Not punishment. But transformation. Taking brokenness and making it whole. Taking hatred and responding with purpose. Taking pain and transmuting it into power. They tried to make her small. Instead, they taught her to soar. And the sky is just the beginning.